Hey everybody, we are here with these amazing Co-op Dayton Conversations, and the way that we want to move is just we want to get rooted and to know like where this all began. I think oftentimes we kind of do things and we have really great intentions for ourselves and for the people around us and for our community, but it's always great to look back and see like how they started. And I feel like when we're transparent and we tell the stories, we're able to connect better with each other and not get things misconstrued. Like the things that are happening in our community now with Co-op Dayton, all of these co-ops that are popping up, Westside Makerspace, Gem City Market, they've been built by the community for the community. And so I'm here with two legends, Lela Klein and Ellen Vera. Lela was a part of starting and being a part of Co-op Dayton, Gem City Market. And I'm going to actually let you guys introduce because I feel like this will help me understand your roles too, because I've just been moving and working with y'all. So we'll go ahead and start with Lela and then Ellen. Introduce yourself, please.
So I'm Lela Klein. I grew up in Dayton, but I had moved away when I was 19 and I came back in 2012. So when I was in my early 30s, when I had my first kid and was hoping to have a second one. And I was one of the original board members of GDUCI, Gaducci, which became Co-op Dayton. And I also was one of the original board members of the Gem City Market. And I'm still on the board of the Gem City Market.
Yeah. And so Ellen Vera, obviously, and also I'm from kind of the Cincinnati area, born and raised. I also gone away for school and came back, I guess that was 2007. And so I was doing union organizing in the greater Cincinnati area, really focusing on immigrant workers and helping them to, stand up for their rights and whatnot. But I was getting really frustrated because our laws are just so awful in terms of protecting workers. And I was looking for a way to not always be on the defense, but actually have a proactive way to approach creating the types of workplaces we wanted to see. And a really dear mentor of mine named Phil Amadon introduced me to the really amazing group of worker-owned co-ops, one of the largest and most successful group of worker-owned co-ops in the world called Mondragon in the northeast region of Spain. And that lit a fire under me. And I was just so excited to see that there was a way to do business in a way that really centered people and, economic democracy. And so as a result of that, I helped to start Co-op Cincy, which is a co-op development organization in Cincinnati. And I think from a lot of that work and from relationships with people like Lela and Erica, we were able to just, share what we were doing and working on and get people excited up here as well. And so, that's who I am. And that's what I'm doing today. We've got a network of about 15 to 16 co-ops around Cincinnati that we've been working on since about 2011.
Wow. Thanks for sharing, y'all. One thing that stuck out to me before we really get into the weeds, Ellen, you said something about not wanting to like fight the system in a defense way, but in another way. Can you share that quote again and then tell us the difference between the two?
Yeah. So, in terms of creating the economy that we want to see, we have to have multiple approaches. And sometimes that means that we have to be in a fight mode, right? Where we're like, hey, no, you cannot take away my rights. No, you must give me more money. But we also need to be doing that in a proactive way, right? Where we are creating the types of workplaces that we want to see. And so that's what I was really hungering for as a young labor organizer, to say, okay, I'm doing the fight all the time. I'm out there on the picket lines and the rallies, and we're, filing for union elections. But there's nothing that I'm doing to actually proactively create the type of workplaces that I want to see and not always have to be on the defense. So that's what, proactively creating worker-owned businesses really allowed. It was to have both of those strategies happening at the same time.
I think I remember you saying to me sometime early on, like, instead of like always fighting bad bosses, we can like have it be so the workers are the bosses. Like, that was compelling to me.
One of the things that I love to say is like, instead of fighting for like the crumbs of the pie, like I want to own the whole pie. And so that's a part of it, is like, we are like owning these businesses. We have full control. Doesn't mean that they're perfect in any way, shape or form, but we have so much more ability to affect the policies and procedures and how we treat one another, when we, the workers, are the ones who are making the decisions. So.
I love that. We're gonna own this pie. So let's move into it. Lela, can we talk about where this like movement started and like wanting to own the pie, wanting to take control of our economy? Where did all of this start in Dayton?
Well, I can say where it started for me. I also was in the labor movement, also was doing work around unions and workers' rights. I was I had been a union organizer and then had gone to law school and become a union lawyer. And I was working at an organization called the IUECWA. Shout out to the union. And I was their lawyer and then eventually general counsel. But in my spare time, I was a volunteer lawyer with the National Lawyers Guild doing legal observing at protests, which is basically like lawyers and legal workers and students volunteering to basically like watch the police at when there's civil disobedience or just like general protests, First Amendment activity happening. Make sure that the police are not violating protesters' rights by just kind of observing, taking good notes, making sure that we kind of like have an eye on the situation from a legal perspective. So I was a legal observer. I had been a legal observer in DC before I moved back to Dayton. So I was with a group of people, including Matt Curry, another one of our awesome co-founders, who was doing legal observing. And through that work is how I met Erica Bruton as well as Amaha Selassie. There was a series of protests after the police murder of John Crawford III in Beaver Creek, in the Beaver Creek Walmart. A young black man who was carrying an air rifle that was for sale at the Walmart through the store and who was shot and killed within less than a second of the police encountering him. So there was a movement to demand justice for John Crawford and demand accountability for the Beaver Creek police. And I was doing legal observing at those protests. So that's how I met Amaha. That's how I met Erica. And that was all in like, I think 2014. And then sort of after that, Erica, I wasn't there, but Erica went to, I'm sure Ellen will talk about this. Erica went and like learned about what was happening in Cincinnati. And then she convened a meeting in Dayton and she invited me to that meeting to talk about co-ops, to basically talk about not just like one co-op, like the grocery store, but actually to talk about how do we build a co-op movement? How do we build worker co-ops? And it was right away really exciting to me for some of the same reasons Ellen said. I had been doing labor organizing and being a labor lawyer for my career at that point. But this felt like a really innovative way to build worker power. That was sort of my first, what I got excited about. And it was like it was a coincidence as well, because at the union, I had just hired Casey Witten Amadon, Phil Amadon, who Ellen just mentioned, his son, who was also a labor lawyer. I had just hired him to work with me at the union, and he had been working with Ellen at Co-op Cincy trying to build a grocery store in Cincinnati. So like, it felt like the whole world was kind of like full circle. Erica invited me to this meeting to talk about co-ops and grocery stores. I think that was when I met you, Ellen. I think that was the day I met you. But I had just hired Casey and I was like, hey, Casey, I'm going to this meeting. And he was like, oh, I'm really involved in that in Cincinnati. Let me go with you. And so we went over to Central State and that was like the first big meeting. So that's kind of like, I think there were people talking about food justice coming out of the opportunity maps. There were people talking about accountability for the police. The groups intersected and kind of came together around Erica's big idea, which was like, how could we build a grocery store that was owned by the community and workers?
Thanks for sharing, Lela. The question that comes to mind for me right now, Ellen, like, is this kind of similar to how Co-op Cincy kind of came about? Like this need, people coming together. Did you guys have we kind of joke around and say like Co-op Cincy is Co-op Dayton's big sister organization. Did you guys have a big sister organization?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I would say that the movement in Cincinnati really came out of kind of a melding of the different kind of immigrant rights, labor movement and peace and justice movement in Cincinnati. Like the initial core group of us, there were 4 of us who were coming together. We had been doing activism together on all these different issues, and really we were feeling like, gosh, we feel like we're just keep putting Band-Aids on problems. We're just trying to get to the root of the problem, and just how crucial kind of good employment, family sustaining jobs is for solving so many of our problems. And so, I think it was as we, Mondragon, that amazing group of co-ops in Spain, I guess I would say is our big sister. Like that's the one that we like our North Star, is really trying to achieve that type of social change, right? Like they started with one small co-op with 5 people making kerosene stoves, almost 70 years ago now. And then, within 25 to 30 years went to, full employment in the region, where there had been over 50% unemployment and now have over 70,000 people employed and close to 100 co-ops. So it was like, that was the type of social change that just was like, that is what we want to do. That's what we want to see. And their quality of life, is one of the best in the world. And it's because of the way that they built their businesses. It's not due to some type of social service program or taxation. It's really about how they define, ownership and broaden ownership in their region. So yeah, so that's what got us super excited. And then, we met for a year really studying that model and studying this agreement that Mondragon had made with the Steelworkers Union. So really kind of bringing that labor movement, piece into it. And then after we did that for a year and felt like we had at least a decent grasp of kind of what their history had been and how that had happened, we had a big community meeting, had, over 100 folks come out, helped them learn also about, this amazing movement in Spain, and then got to work on like 3 different, projects, have like kind of organizing committees, what I would call them, that got to work on our food related project, our construction related project, and a manufacturing related project. So yeah, that's how we started off.
That's great. That really leads us into our next question about like, once you have this idea, Erica went and saw the co-op models in Cincy and Co-op Cincy, and then came back, had a conversation with Lela. What happened next, Lela? And how did the community start to get involved in these conversations?
Well, Erica is a brilliant organizer, and so she was working with an organization called the Miami Valley Organizing Collaborative, and she after she went to Cincinnati, met Ellen, learned about the work that they were doing, I think visited our harvest, which was their first like operational co-op. She kind of did what you just described. She convened a community meeting. So she very brilliantly invited like key folks from around the city into a room. I remember we were in the multipurpose room at Central State, the large multipurpose room, and there were probably 50 people at that first meeting. And it was like, some of the city commissioners were there. I remember there were like activists and organizers. There were folks from neighborhood groups. There were people who had been in that kind of like food subgroup of the opportunity maps. But yeah, there were about 50 people there. And I remember, Ellen, that you had like just very recently gotten married, because when you were presenting on your laptop and like the first thing you saw was like a beautiful picture of you and Flecker. That was like my first impression of you. And you gave like like you just did, you gave like an incredibly inspiring, 20-minute talk about the powerful example of Mondragon, and that they started how we started, with just a few people in a room, and that within 20 years they had solved an intractable problem in their community. And coming off of that meeting, Erica basically asked people to sign up and commit to working groups. And I think originally there was like a steering committee, and there was like a social media committee. I mean, we had, like you do, we had like different people committed to do various things to basically like, okay, let's do what Co-op Cincy did. Let's spend a year like really deeply exploring whether this is the right model for us. And so that first meeting was probably like an hour and a half, like lunch meeting. And then pretty shortly thereafter, there was like a steering committee that started meeting every month at Central State. doing some studying and like reading, but also doing some kind of like initial kind of strategy mapping of like, what would it take in Dayton? You know, how should we proceed? And pretty early on, we decided that we wanted to have a model based on Co-op Cincy that wouldn't, like, we didn't just want to say like, oh, because a lot of people were there for food justice, but we said like, we could open a grocery store and that wouldn't be enough. Like we want to have this transformative effect on our city. We want to like build an economy, not just a grocery store. So pretty quickly within that original kind of like group of maybe 30 people who were kind of meeting regularly every month, we decided to start both starting a nonprofit incubator, like a movement container, which would become Co-op Dayton, and then also start to explore whether there was a viable business plan to start a grocery store.
Wow, this is so fun. So there were a lot of meetings, a lot of conversations, a lot of people, a lot of just like decision making among the people. When did you guys start to notice the cooperative movement was building? Like people, what was people's reactions in Dayton when they saw the Madrigal model? Like, were they like, wow, or were they apprehensive from your perspective, Lela?
I just felt like people got it right away. Like, and having been an organizer before, having been a union organizer and having to like talk people through the stages of like, you know, when you're talking to somebody about like, hey, in your workplace, you would have more power if you and your coworkers all came together and negotiated for your terms and conditions, like negotiated over your pay. Like that is a hard sell. Like it's intuitive and it's totally impactful and powerful. And it's a very, like when people get it, they really get it, but people are always really scared at the beginning and they don't get it right away. And it's like, you have to kind of like really talk to people and kind of like continue to build trust and relationship, which is true for all organizing. But this idea, I've never seen anything catch fire as quickly as it did. Like I felt like, I remember saying to my mom that I think because people in Dayton at that time, especially this was in 2012, like everything was broken in Dayton. Like it was, you know, like the entire West Side had just been divested for decades. And like all of our big institutions that we relied on felt like they had let us down. And I think people were just like really ready for something else, ready for something hopeful, ready to build. And I think people were really sick of seeing things close and they were ready to like think about how we could open stuff and do it ourselves. Like, oh, I think that's the other thing is people in Dayton were like kind of over waiting for other people to come in and solve our problems. Like it was like, all right, we had this whole core of businesses like the NCRs and the GMs that like, we gave our lives to, and then when they didn't need us anymore, they just left. Like they weren't ours. They didn't belong to us. They weren't, you know, even though we thought of them as Dayton companies, they didn't think of them as Dayton companies, you know? And so I think, yeah, it felt like an idea whose time had come, and I've like never seen anything like it before or since.
Say that. So I want to take a step back because I feel like this is where people get super confused. Just like separating Gem City Market from Co-op Dayton, whereas like Co-op Dayton is the incubator and Gem City Market is a cooperative business that was incubated alongside Co-op Dayton, but not like they aren't the same thing. And so first, I just wanted to highlight that. I can see why people get confused because the conversations were happening in the same timeline. But just to clarify, there are two different things in partnership and in support of one another, but they are two different things, right? Is that a good way to describe it?
Yeah. I like in a perfect world, we would have like taken a year or two and like built Co-op Dayton and like, you know, developed a kind of an overarching strategy and, you know, like built it as a movement space and then started to build a grocery store or waited for the community to say like what co-ops they wanted to build with the tools that we were learning, but they really did both start simultaneously in the same room from the same people, which is why it gets confusing, I think.
I agree. Ellen, did y'all have like any similar problems? Well, not that it's a problem, but any.
Yeah.
In
I mean, we definitely did the same thing of simultaneously starting, the nonprofit incubator while we were working on the projects. And it was a lot, right? Like it was a lot to do at once. But I think at the same time, it would have been a lot harder if we did not have the nonprofit at the center to be able to get the grant money to help, do this work, because it takes a while, right, to get these businesses off the ground. And so you have to have that longer, that ability to pay people and do that work before these businesses are really making money and standing on their own 2 feet. So I think it was totally needed and necessary. And then I also feel like one of the worst things that can happen in a movement is to lose momentum, right? And so I think having projects that people are excited about, that they're digging in around, it gives you like the why behind, yes, we want to create something. This is what we're trying to build, right? Versus kind of saying, we're going to do that thing. It's going to happen. But first we got to have this really, clear, put together incubator that knows all the things. You could lose momentum and never get to the actual projects, if you're not careful, not that you can't do that first, but I think you just have to be careful about the momentum piece.
Well, and I think there were some people who were really ready for the idea of like, we want to build a people-centered economy and we want to build like a model, like a post-capitalist model in some ways. Like there were people who were really ready for that. And there were other people for whom like what came first was like, everyone should be able to access fresh food in their neighborhood. And then by thinking about, okay, why can't we access fresh food in like, 70% of Dayton or whatever? Like, what are the economic factors? Like, what are the policy decisions that led to this? What are the, like, how are businesses being run now? Like, how are our lives and our economy being shaped now? Why don't we have this thing that we feel like we should just all have? And then they came to like, oh, we actually do need to look for a different model. We need to look for ways to build a different kind of economy. So for some people, food was first. Some people, like for me, it was really about worker ownership. That was like how I came to it. But I do think food was just like this very broad, like everyone gets it. It's intuitive. Everyone eats, everyone grocery shops for the most part, or has grocery shopped.
Thank you guys for sharing. I like the idea of like, I like just people having opinions, like what comes first, who comes first, like what comes first, the chicken or the egg, the cooperative grocery store, the cooperative incubator. And I feel like that's kind of where healthy dialogue lives. And I just appreciate honoring like those conversations. So one thought that I had was like the cooperative principles and how like they've shown up in our community or aligned. Like, how do you guys feel like the cooperative principles helped fuel the movement?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that I think what's really helpful about the cooperative principles is they are a guide, right? They're kind of something we all look towards of what are we building and how are we building it, and keeping us on track. So whether that be that this is a democratic organization or that, we're going to look at wage solidarity, but just like making sure that I think sometimes, you're so focused on, okay, we've got to get this business off the ground. And so you can sometimes, for example, say, oh, we're going to take this investment, even though it's going to compromise maybe that autonomy, if that democratic ownership is like, wait, no, we're not going to cross that line, right? It keeps us on that straight path of like, this is what we're trying to build. So that's why I appreciate the principles.
I also I think the Mondragon principles in particular, like really give shape to things that like, we like intuit. Like in most cases, if you've had a job, you've been in that place where you're like, I am making this company money and I am not getting any of that money. And they're like making decisions that make my life harder just to make them more money. And then you can like read the Mondragon principle that's like, the like sovereignty of labor, like that people's lives are the most important thing, or that like keeping and preserving good jobs is like a supreme goal of a company. And then you can say, oh, okay, like, so this thing that I was feeling actually there's a way to talk about it. And then you can look at like, how does that principle show up in the Madrigon businesses? How has it informed their decision making? How has it informed the decision making at our harvest? Like for me, as somebody who had like been thinking about these things for a long time, I found like some of the Madrigon principles to give voice to things like the idea of the instrumental and subordinate nature of capital. I actually spent like a year working at Co-op Cincy to learn and also to like hopefully try to start a project, which unfortunately didn't totally get off the ground. And I remember in a staff meeting, we were like talking about each principle so we could understand them, because we were just teaching ourselves, like, what does this mean? Because it's all translated from Spanish and then the words are all jargony and wonky. And I remember it was like, oh, like you need money, but money shouldn't be the be all and end all. Like that. Oh, that's what that means. Like, oh, right. Okay. I've always sort of thought that like, we should never like pay back debt at the expense of like having to lay off workers or like lower their money, because the important thing is that we have good jobs. So that was like, oh, that really like the principles, though they can feel a little wonky at times, they like really do give voice to things that like I think we all have felt just working in the workplace.
Yes. And so you guys said a few of the principles, but I'm just gonna like say a few more just so that they're clear. But some of the the Madrigal principles are like centered around, like Ellen said, sovereignty of labor, or maybe Lela said that, but like just the contribution of workers is valued above capital. So people over profit. And it's funny to see these principles that they've already been in our community. Like, how long have we been saying people over profit? And then here's the Madrigal principle, like saying it in such a fancy way. There's another one that I really love is like innovation, encouraging creativity and adaptation to market changes, like making sure that nothing stays the same, because we realize that when things stay the same, that's how we overlook our, most vulnerable people. And then solidarity, mutual support and cooperation among members. So just like having that strong, solid stance with each other. I feel like those live in me. Do you guys have favorite principles that you're like, this is my one, this is my jam? Like, do you guys have one, or all of them your favorites? A+ students?
I mean, I'm such a nerd. It is like the instrumental and subordinate nature of capital, partly because I think I had to learn it and it was hard to learn. And so when you learn something hard, you're like, I know this thing. But also because like growing up in Dayton, we all saw these big companies, basically do what some people call financialization. They like basically put all their value to push value towards their shareholders. They pushed value towards like creating like products that could be sold on the stock market, like financial products. And they did that at the expense of workers. They basically they paid capital back. They paid for money by laying off workers and cutting jobs and making our community worse. And so when I learned about that principle, I was like, oh yeah, I totally get it. Even though at first it was hard to get. Once I got it, I was like, yes, this one's mine.
Yeah. And mine's probably the sovereignty of labor, because it's that hand of like, yes, people first. Like that's something that totally resonated with me. And it's like, we can do business in a way that does put people first. Like it doesn't have to be the status quo that we always see, that truly can, take place. And I think lately what I've really been enjoying too is inter-cooperation amongst, cooperatives and movements. I mean, I think obviously the relationship between Co-op Cincy, Co-op Dayton is so much a piece of that. It's been so beautiful lately within our co-op network as these businesses start to kind of really get on their own 2 feet and, seeing them work together with one another. And like we have a social every month, and just seeing those relationships build, it's like, yes, this is it. This is the type of economy that we want to live in, the type of community. So I think those are my favorite 2 right now.
Every time I buy Guided by Mushrooms at Gem City Market, I get a little tingle. I'm like, oh, I'm doing it. I'm doing the inner cooperation between cooperatives.
Yeah, it's really beautiful when you will desire to live this way and you're able to like do it. So, oh my God, we could spend so much time here, but I'm gonna like move on to like, so we met with Co-op Cincy. Thank you to the brilliant Erica. We started having community conversations. We introduced the Madrigon, the principals, Co-op Dayton, or this co-op incubator. We didn't name it just yet. And this co-op business, grocery store maybe, where it's planted and growing. And then cut to years later, these things grew. First of all, before we get to Gem City Market opening and actualizing, can we talk about a Co-op Dayton? Where did Guducci come from? And then why did you guys switch from Guducci to Co-op Dayton?
Well, Co-op Cincy used to be called the Cincinnati Union Co-op Initiative. We became the Greater Dayton Union Cooperative Initiative, Guducci, not Gaduki. And then Guducci, I don't know, people liked it. Like, it sounds like, people were like, oh, it sounds like you bought like a Gucci bag or whatever, Guducci. But then over time, it just felt, it was clunky. Like, new people came on. I feel like Atana was one of the early people to be like, no, you really have to change that name. It's clunky. I don't remember. I think we changed the name in 2019 to Co-op Dayton. And I think we were sort of looking around the country. There were all of these organizations like Cooperation Jackson, and there was Cooperation Buffalo. And so then we were like, oh, well, maybe we'll be Cooperation Dayton. And then I don't remember exactly how it got shortened to Co-op Dayton. We're still technically Guducci, doing business as Co-op Dayton. And then after we changed, you guys changed, right?
We did.
The little sister became the big
That's
sister.
right. You did. We thought that your guys' name was just made so much sense. It was so clear what you were about, what you were doing. And like we said, we saw this from around the country. So we were like, okay, we're doing it. This is it. So, yeah.
I do remember like a little pang of like, there were conversations on the board about like taking the word union out of the name. Like, it was definitely not done without a lot of like thought. But it's funny because the union people were often the ones who were like, it's clunky. Like, you don't have like, like, live it. You don't have to say it. You just live it. I do remember like our union siblings saying like, you should consider a more streamlined name. And we were like, oh, okay. You think so too. Okay. I love that, Morgan. I did not know that.
For those of you who cannot read the comments, Morgan is our audience member today, and she's saying that Guducci is an herb known for immortality, which is beautiful because we want this to last forever.
I cannot believe we didn't know that. Or maybe other people knew it and I just didn't.
So that is funny. I always thought Co-op Dayton got their name from Co-op Cincy. So that is really cool to know.
We did, but then they got their name from us after.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Thank you. Yep. Clarifying. So as Co-op Dayton is being actualized alongside it and in the same but different conversations, Gem City Market is being actualized, which Erica and Carl and Cheryl are talking about that in another video. But I'm going to speed through. So this community had to find a location, which took some time and some conversations. Once the location was found, we voted on what the building would look like. We went through the process, voted on the name, voted on every single thing, which was beautiful and fun, getting those emails, filling out those Google forms. And fast forward to the store being built and having groceries and opening in 2020, Lela, was it? 2021. What did it feel like for you guys to like see this cooperative actualize after all of these conversations?
The first time the automatic doors opened, I like burst into tears. Just because it was, I don't know, just like it was so real. And of course I naively thought that getting the store open would be the hard part. We thought that it was the end and it was really the beginning. But yeah, I mean, seeing people's like, especially the people who had been there since the very beginning. You know, some of the elders who were just like with us from that very first meeting that Erica had invited. I will never, there will never be anything. I can't, like I said, there's never been anything before or since, and there will never be anything like that for me.
Ellen, I know you were all the way in Cincy, so far away, but like, what were your thoughts when you were seeing, because your support was a part of it too?
Yeah, I mean, we were so excited. We had also a grocery store project that had been going on since 2013 for years and years, and died right before that, like maybe, I don't know, a year before that. And it was, but so much of the learnings and like, you know, the feasibility study, the plans, our general manager that we had brought on to do it, like so much had been able to be shared with, you know, that with you all and with the Gen City Market team. And so to see that, it's like, oh, thank God, like all that work was not for nothing. Like this truly is coming to life in Dayton. And it just, yeah, it was just beautiful. It was like, I knew how hard, you know, I'd come to different things throughout the years. I knew just how hard you guys had worked. And it was just such a great thing to see that, like, you know, that self-determination as a community and bringing this beautiful store to life was possible. And I think it gave everybody just so much hope and excitement to say, yes, we really can create this type of economy. We want to see this type of food economy we want to see. And we were just so excited that we could have been a little part of helping you guys make that happen.
And not a little part either. Like, I think it's important to say, yeah, like our original business plan was like, you guys had done a ton of research that then we were able to benefit from. And so if you, like, our business plan eventually evolved. Like, as we got closer to opening, we revise as you do. But like our first business plan was essentially like cut and paste, replace Cincinnati with Dayton, and then like went in and added our market study numbers because we had obviously a different market study and stuff like that. And then, you know, every time I needed anything, I would call. And like, you know, Kristen was so good at thinking about the capital stack. Like, I remember Kristen Barker coming and like talking sense into us early on. At the very beginning, you came and you were like, this is going to be hard and you might not get it done. Like it, and it will take years and it will take millions of dollars. And we were all like starry eyed. So Kristen did like our first ever board retreat and like really kind of like scared us straight. And then the other thing, and this is like, you know, I think it's important to say, like, not every business succeeds. Not every startup opens. Like the Apple Street, which was the co-op grocery store that they were trying to do in Cincinnati that didn't come to fruition for a lot of reasons. Like watching the way that you guys went through the governance process also of like, you know, deciding to move away from it. Like that was like that was happening as we were getting ready to open. And it also like showed us, you know, like when we have a co-op, like we own it when it's good and we own it when it's bad. You know, and I watched you guys have those member meetings where you guys talked, you know, the hard truths of like the way that things were happening with your financing. And like, I think that's, you know, it kept us grounded in like the reality of what it is to open a business, a co-op.
Yep. I love that. It's yours when it's good and it's yours when it's bad. It is so true.
Yeah.
I love that. Why do you guys think it's so important to use cooperative economics when you're building thriving communities where divestment have taken place? Like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would just say that what we've been doing isn't working, right? Like the traditional models, the way that we do put capital as the most important thing and a profit, you know, as the most important thing, like that obviously didn't work for that community. So we have to go at it at a different approach. You know, if we come in and we're going to like try to turn a community around, but we don't put, you know, the folks who are living there like at the center, it's just going to be the same thing, right? It's not going to have the types of results that we want to see. Yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah. And I think, you know, Amaha always says, and I've heard you say this, Tejal, like we're interconnected whether we want to be or not. We rise and fall as a people, as a community. Like no one can thrive while other people are have boots on their necks, and so if that's the case, if we actually are interconnected, then why wouldn't we build businesses and models that reflect that interconnection and take advantage of it rather than try to sever it?
Yeah, it feels like I was like canoeing with a Maha because, this summer, I mean, it's always his thing, but this summer he was really heavy on it. Like, let's have canoeing meetings. But we were canoeing, and one of the questions that we were pondering was just like, why not try? Like, it feels like there's like some fear on even like trying to try something different, or maybe apprehension, but it's like, let's just try it. And the principles, like even reading them, like I said earlier, they align with things that we've already been saying generations. And it's like, if you don't like things, you can be a part of the conversation and like change them. I mean, I just love the ability to have a say so on what's going on. So as we move forward, how can we look to other successful co-ops to just serve as a blueprint for future initiatives, like Guided by Mushrooms? What can we take away from that successful, lovely co-op as we continue to like grow jobs and places of business where people feel safe and heard and valued?
One thing I've always admired about Ellen is that she is like the worker power, cooperative, but also she's like, let's take over the world. Like, Ellen, you're just like very ambitious. You're like, let's do big, hard things. And so you've always talked about like, if we have something that's working, let's franchise it. Or if, let's grow the things that are working. And so I like, on the other hand, right, like we want to like respect everyone's like capacity and not get bigger than what we can actually sustain within our, while balancing our like lives. And because it's if we're not doing this to like make communities' lives better, then why are we doing it? But I do think things like Guided by Mushrooms that are working, like how can we invest in those models and grow them? How can we franchise them? Or like, I don't think everything has to scale, but I think if something's working really well, if it can scale in like a human-centered way, that could be really exciting. So I want to bring Guided by Mushrooms to Cincinnati and Sustainergy to Dayton. I mean, I know.
They're ready. It's like
I know.
We're ready to hire a salesperson in Dayton by mid-February. He's like, tell them that. I'm like, okay.
Good, because I just, I know I'm working in the sustainability space. So I'm like, all right, there's a lot of dollars to put a lot of projects on let's make sure that it gets done with like worker owned businesses that are like rooted and grounded with people in Dayton who have been left out of the economy.
Ellen, earlier you said you guys have 16 co-ops in your network. Like, what's the secret sauce? Like, what is the thing that you feel like hold these co-ops together and allow you guys to continue to build your network?
I mean, I think it's just that being consistent and the type of support that we provide. I mean, I think before we were the protagonists of our projects. Like we were leading them up. Like I served as the first CEO of our harvest for the first 3 years. And as we've progressed, we've been able to kind of have these co-op boot camps where we are taking, several groups through at the same time, right? Like we are working anywhere from like 4 to 8 groups at a time and, finding folks in the community who want to build something and getting them excited about doing that in a cooperative way. So I think that has definitely helped to, increase the number of co-ops that we're able to, get off the ground and then support. But I think it's like versus I think with some incubators of just traditional businesses, it's, you go through this kind of a business education program and then they're like, okay, good luck. You did it. You got your certificate. And then you're just like, oh my God, how do I did that, but there's so much more that's coming. There's so many challenges, so many things to figure out. And so I think one thing that we do very differently, and I think you guys do as well, is we stick with them, every step of the way. So like we meet with them, monthly, weekly, bi-weekly basis. We're helping them build that co-op culture while they're, figuring these things out. We're helping them work on strategy. We're serving on their boards. So I think it's just that deep connection and ongoing support and really trying to just help them thrive wherever they're at or overcome whatever challenge that they're experiencing, that has really enabled, and not all of it has been successful, right? Like we talked about Apple Street Market. There's several, right? There's many we've had to put to bed and have not worked out. But I think that's what's enabled the ones that are continuing to exist and grow and strengthen to be successful is because of that wraparound support that we provide.
Thank you. So as we close this out and we think about like the future of our community, what are some things that you guys are excited for? Like the community has shown its power built on like the work of all of the people that have come before us. What are you guys excited for in the future?
I'm really excited because I've transitioned out of like being kind of full-time in the co-op movement. Like I'm excited to be that like champion supporter from the community. And I am like bringing the cooperative mindset into everything I do now, even though I don't like do cooperatives professionally anymore. Like once a cooperator, always a cooperator.
Yeah. I think for me, I'm so excited to see how this movement is growing. Like when we first started 12, 13 years ago, it felt like it's just a very small, very kind of niche, nascent movement. And now, we're seeing this just like all over the country. And so I'm excited to see, especially the co-ops that we started 12 years ago, like how they are progressing and growing and just getting to that next level, especially when they're like finally getting to a point where like, oh, now it really does feel like a good job. Like before we're like, okay, we're trying to create a good job. We're not quite there yet. But now, they're actually starting to provide benefits and pay, better than they were initially as a startup, which, it's just so hard to do. So I think, yeah, I'm just excited for where the possibilities of where the movement can go. The interconnection amongst all of our co-op development organizations and around the country. And I feel like this is something that within the community, like it feels like it's something that just makes sense to so many folks. So I think we're just going to keep on seeing, more and more people kind of catch on. And I hope that we can create that same type of domino effect. Like within that region of Spain, they have 100 or so co-ops in the Mondragon network, but over, 1,200 co-ops that are within that region because of the movement they've started. And so I think, we're going to have that happen in Cincinnati, Dayton. It's coming. So.
Thanks, y'all. I'm excited too. I'm excited for just the movement. Like we're moving. I know sometimes it might feel like it's dragging or I don't know. We're moving and it's really exciting to see the progress. And I really am excited to continue to look to Co-op Cincy to see, like, I feel like you guys are in the future. And so like we are like behind you in a good way. But like seeing your vision actualized, that gives like me like hope because you guys are so close and tangible. And like you said, you guys creating jobs that have good benefits and like are able to like pay people what they want to be paid. Like that is what people are saying. That's what they want. And some people don't believe cooperatives can do it. But you guys are showing that it can. We're showing that it can. And I'm excited. So if you enjoyed this conversation, please visit coopdayton.org, visit coopcincy.org, learn how you can get involved. You can always donate. You can be a part of it. You can start a co-op with a group of people, but just get involved. And yeah, thank you for coming and thank you guys for your time.
Thanks so much for having us. This was so much fun.